Good morning to one, or good afternoon rather, to one and all. Thank you for joining us today here at Regenesis Business School. We are very privileged to have such a wonderful turnout and such a large audience joining us today for our conversation on the benefits of the digital transformation in the South African public sector. This has been a very topical issue in the recent past. We all know that we've seen some issues with regards to digital platforms being implemented by various government agencies and state parastatals rather, and these implementations have seen varying degrees of success, which we will be discussing with our esteemed panel of panelists today. So from my side, my name is Henk Diedericks. I am the General Manager in the Dean's Office of Regenesis Business School. I will be hosting this discussion today. My colleague, Ms. Linda Coetzee, who was initially scheduled to host this session, has unfortunately, due to unforeseen circumstances, not been able to join us today. So I apologize for that, but I do still have a wonderful panel of experts in the field who will be adding a lot of value to our discussion today. So I will start by introducing our panelists. Firstly, we have Dr. Ndumiso Khoza. He's a digital native who has extensive knowledge and experience in digital business transformation. He's currently an employee of Microsoft, and I'm sure will be providing us with a lot of insights from the private sector as a digital transformation leader. Then from the CSIR, we have Professor Marlene Hurselman. She's a chief researcher at the Council for Scientific and Industrial Research with the CSIR in Pretoria. In this capacity, she is in the Technology Implementation, Monitoring and Evaluation Research Group. She's also the chairperson of the Board of Living Habits in South Africa from its initiation in 2009 to 2014. She's also an adjunct professor at the University of Pretoria in the Faculty of Education. And interestingly enough, I noticed earlier that she has actually done her doctorate in gaming, of all things, which should provide a lot of interesting insights into our discussion today. Then Dr. Mukundi Mapangwa, who will be the Assistant Director who is the Assistant Director at the Group of Governance at the City of Johannesburg. Dr. Mapangwa has a PhD and is a highly experienced and qualified public servant with over 14 years of management experience. He obtained his doctorate in philosophy and in social sciences with public management and governance from the University of Northwest. Then we also have Thumiso Tulare, who is joining us from the CSIR. And then finally, we have Keneilwe Maremi, who is also a researcher at the CSIR. All right, just before we get started, just some housekeeping rules as we enter our discussion. For those of you who have joined us in listening to our discussion today, you are unfortunately muted, but we do encourage you to pose questions. At the bottom of your screen, there will be a Q&A icon. I encourage you to please type questions for us and for our panelists, and I will try and get to as many of them as possible as time allows us. So please, we would like your engagement. We would like to hear your insights and your questions. You may have a lot of questions that I may not be addressing. So please, I encourage all of you to ensure that you are involved in our discussion. And if you have any questions, please pose them in our Q&A chat at the bottom of your screen. Right, so from our side, I would like to get started by having a quick overview of what is currently happening. And we will be using the paper written by Keneilwe Maremi, Tumiso Tulare, and Professor Marlene Herselman, titled "The Benefits of Digital Transformation, Addressing the Hindrances and Challenges of E-Government Services in South Africa." This was a very interesting paper written in 2022. Obviously, with the digital age that we do live in now, a year has passed since this paper was published, and a lot can happen within a year's time. And for this reason, whilst we will be using this paper as the basis for our discussion, I think that all our panelists, I'm sure, will be able to provide us with greater insights and new developments that have happened over the past year that will also be very vital to the way South Africa is transforming digitally and how that is affecting the public sector. So, to get right into it, we know that the government is playing a vital role in our digital transformation and the relations between the digital, or the relationship between government and the private sector, the businesses in our private sector, is very much dependent on the government's ability to transform in a digital fashion. And I would like to hear the thoughts of Keneilwe on how she feels government is so far developing digitally and how you see this progress in the year 2023. Keneilwe, over to you.
Thank you so much, Hank. So originally I had prepared sort of like a presentation, but I'm just going to leave it aside and go straight to your question. For me, I feel like government has done so much. And the reason I'm saying this is because of the COVID-19 pandemic that we're faced with. I think prior to the COVID-19 pandemic, we had not seen much of improvements. I mean, they were trying, and we can use a system such as the eNate system as one of the examples, where you need to book in for your license and go to the traffic department and collect your license from there. And I feel like post the COVID-19 pandemic, if you look at that specific system, although they had introduced it and you were able to go online and select a date on where you would want to go and renew your license, it was still chaotic, according to my opinion. You would still go there and there would be massive queues. It was just a disaster. And when you were to go to the there's like a door that allows you to go to the entry point. And when you get to the inside, there's 2 help desk people that are sitting there for inquiries, and they would direct you to queues where you would need to go to. And if by mistake they happen to direct you to a wrong queue, you would still have to, go back and stand on another queue. And chances of you getting the services that you wanted would have been a very slim one. And you would have to basically go back home and come back another day. And we've seen so many people that would wake up in the wee hours of the morning trying to get something as simple as a license renewed, and their requests were not attended to in time. But post the COVID-19 pandemic, as COVID-19 was posing the risk of infection, I think it has improved their process decimally. And this is just one typical example that I've seen personally, because I just renewed my license recently. And I feel like the way they have transformed that process on its own, it's amazing to even observe. I mean, there's still a lot of work to do and a lot of improvements thereafter. But so far, you would see a great improvement. The last time I went, I just booked online. And when I got to the traffic department, they tell you that come at least 30 minutes in advance. When I got there, there was hardly lines. The people by the entry point, our help desk, our inquiry desk, would then have a list of all the people that are supposed to go in at a specific time, and they ask you what time is scheduled for. And when you know that specific time, there's already a number associated with that. So they tell you, go and sit at E or go and sit at D. And there you just go and you do what you know, you do what you need to do. I think the last time I was there, literally the longest time I was sitting, waiting to be assisted or being assisted or in a queue was literally 20 minutes, and I was out of there. And I think this is a huge improvement. If you were to compare it, obviously, to a private sector, this might be totally different in the sense that when you go to a bank, for example, and you have a specific query that you want to get solved, maybe you have multiples of them and you sit down with a consultant, chances are by the time you get out of there, one consultant would have assisted you. But in government, we're still having different people doing different things. You'd find that you have a line that will take you for pictures with the licensing department where you need to go and do an eye test. There'll be another line for pictures, and then there'll be another line for the cashier. But now I think that they still have a lot of work to do. However, I believe that they have done something, they have done so much. And to tie back to, it could be the issues of finances as well. It could be so many factors that are hindering this, but I think COVID-19 pandemic really opened eyes to many organizations, publicly, private sectors, the world at large, even people that are supposed to embrace this technology and incorporate it in their day-to-day work. Because we might look at the government sectors as a sector on its own, but forgetting the people or the employees that are working for the government. And you'd find that maybe there was a resistance to that for them to adjusting or adapting to the specific technology infrastructure. So, but I think after that, and I see your hand in Dumiso, I think after that, after the COVID-19 pandemic, so much changes have been implemented. There's still so much more that can be done in terms of improving the overall performances, in terms of improving the overall processes. However, I believe a lot has been done and we can only see improvements going forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kaniulwe, and apologies for not allowing your presentation, but you are more than welcome to share that with us as well. Ndumiso, I see you had a comment.
Yes, thanks, Hank, and thanks, Kaniulwe, for that input that you just provided. And you raised a number of pertinent questions that I, obviously from a private sector, I thought maybe I should just kind of raise, right? So the first thing is we're all acknowledging that the pandemic kind of thrust our public sector into action in terms of adopting digital technologies, right? Which is actually not too different or dissimilar from what happens in the private sector, right? So a lot of companies that are forced to adapt digital transformation, most of the time is because they're forced from external factors. So, you know, in private sector, there's disruption that's caused by startups, for instance, a lot of times who are adopting these new and emerging technologies, which then force companies to kind of react and kind of protect their territory. But when it comes to a public sector, I think the key thing that I want to mention is the collaborative approach that's required, right? I don't think government can do this on its own, right? If you honestly think about it, when you look at, you mentioned the cost implications that are involved, when you look at the skills required, when you look at the knowledge and experience that's required, right? I think it can only win, government can only win if it collaborates with the private sector, and if it collaborates with other government departments. And then through that, then, you know, start taking advantage and leveraging some of these capabilities. So, you know, one of the examples I was going to bring up is the bank one, right? Which you mentioned as well, that, you know, through lack, I'm not sure if it's lack of what exactly, I don't want to put a term to it, but, you know, people started applying for driver's licenses and actually not driver's licenses, for IDs and passports at banks, right? Because what government realized is the banks had, you know, the verification tools necessary, they had access to, you know, Home Affairs, you know, and they realized, you know, if we can't, you know, handle the backlog, you know, let's let the private sector do that. And I think the more they kind of engage, you know, in those situations, the more it'll help them, but they can't negate the responsibility in providing those services. I think for me, that's the balance also they have to manage in terms of, you know, sometimes the services are supposed to be provided by them, but it helps to collaborate and engage and leverage other private sector, as well as other government departments, which is another thing I'm hoping we'll discuss later.
Yes, Kanilwe, you have a comment on that?
Yes, thank you. Okay, now I muted my mic. Thank you so much for that. I couldn't agree more, in a sense that collaboration is very important. In fact, it's key. If you look at, I think the government has, I don't want to say sort of like, but I think they're protective in a sense that the major problem that I also see in addition to collaboration would be interoperability, whereby it's sort of difficult to allow certain entities or factors or other organizations to, interoperate, just integrate with them. And I think it's mostly tying also to legacy systems, and also tying to a whole lot of, the norm, being used to the norm, being used to how you engage, being used to how you operate each and every day. But collaboration is the perfect idea that you could have mentioned. I think so many government entities are also seeing the importance of actually partnering with private sectors so that we can take South Africa forth. And yeah, that is the only way, honestly, for government and private sectors and other entities to actually fix. I mean, if you look at Eskom, for example, I feel like, again, if we were to invite in private sectors, many issues would have been resolved. So I agree 110%, Dumiso, with your suggestion about collaboration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kanilwe. We appreciate your insights. Professor Helselman, given what our other panelists have, the insights they have shared, what do you feel? We've seen the successes, as they have mentioned, with regards to banks now being able to issue identification documents and so forth. Why do you think this has not been quicker to escalate to other government departments, and why has the uptake been so slow in the public sector being supported by the private sector?
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. I'll just quickly show my face. You can see I'm actually a human being. Regarding your question, I think in government or in a public sector perspective, the biggest problem that we have seen so far in the monitoring and evaluation of ICT services in the various government departments is the outdated and redundant IT systems that government sits with. And that was also mentioned about the interoperability. So the systems are not automated and integrated. And there's also a silo effect that we find in government, where government departments do not collaborate across with one another to say that I have developed, or we have developed, or invested in developing this type of system, and the others do not know about the system, and then they use their funding and develop a similar system, and the two government parties don't even know that they have a similar system. And then these systems do not integrate with the old infrastructure that government sits with. We know the buildings were not, or still not, geared to have adequate fiber installed on a network system. And apart from that, we find that, there's a big problem with digital literacy skills, bottom up and top down. There's also a disjunct between business expectations from the leaders in government versus the CIOs, the people who are in charge of the equipment or procuring the equipment to be able to comply with the needs of business. So the alignment between ICT and business is also huge, because business wants to function, but IT provides or enable them to function properly. And if those two do not talk to each other, or that if a CIO is not involved in a meeting where business decisions are taken, then you have a big problem, because then the two do not know about the decisions that are made, and they are just told to procure this and that and the other. And that makes it difficult, because then the CIO cannot give insight into the decision that has been taken in a committee that he or she was not involved in. So alignment of business and IT in government is a huge challenge. The other thing that I mentioned is the interoperability and the redundancy of old legacy systems, and coupled with the new demands of 4IR. And we know that AI can make everything much easier, but if you do not have a modernized ITC system throughout government, then you cannot plug on or bolt on 4IR because it's not going to work. So for me, those are the greatest challenges. They are, we can talk about all the challenges, which we know of, but there's also things that are actually working very well. And that is the fact that they have updated certain policies, and they are in the process of, also they have a 4IR policy. The thing is just there's a lot of new and wonderful policies coming to the fore, but there's no way of saying or giving guidelines or how to implement. And I think that is where they have received the message from a latest involvement with the Public Service Commission. We had a roundtable with all these government departments, and they could each tell us their challenges, but then also we wanted to know what is working, what is not working, and why. Easy, plain, straightforward. And it was interesting to see that they all are very happy about the changes that are taking place, because SETA is in the process of upgrading the networks and the systems in government, and hopefully that will have a huge impact. Obviously, everything takes a very long time, and that's a big problem as well in government, is the process of procurement, because there are meetings, the requirements are being provided, and then it takes a very long time to get the right outside partner or the outsourcing partner who has to now come and provide the new infrastructure. It takes forever to make decisions. So the process of decision making, the process of procurement is extremely long. And then you have applied for a laptop in 2021 and you only get it in 2023, and then it's also old as well again. So they are looking into the processes of procurement and to streamline this and to allow government departments not necessarily to work through SETA, but go on their own and procure systems. So that will make a big difference, I think. And I think that is what I should commend government, is that they really want to make a difference. It's just that they sit with a lot of challenges also at leadership level, where they have appointed people who are not ICT inclined, to call it that way, or they're not aware of the benefits, or that if they are aware of the benefits, they don't have the knowledge or the expertise to make decisions regarding ICT services and hardware and software to support the delivery of services to the public. Also, they have now launched a new portal, but the biggest problem is the thing of trust from your normal citizen, because they don't trust government. So how can they then trust the systems to put in the information or to ask information? So the thing of working with digital literacy with the citizen, coupled with the trust that you need to imply as part of your service delivery, those are also issues that needs to be addressed, and they're currently working on that. And I know for a fact. Then there was also this big thing of sharing of data between government departments, and the hackings of cybersecurity on Department of Home Affairs that we are all aware of, how to prevent that. So government are aware of all of these issues, but the thing is that they now need to put some steps into place to address all of these things that I've mentioned, and also make sure that the process of delivery of the need to address the needs of the citizens are actually streamlined, and building blocks are put in place to make this easier and quicker and more efficient. Also, if we look at the success of SARS, SARS systems are really above and beyond, because what they do is, I think, something that the other government departments also are considering, is to use newly graduated IT students who have to support or provide support to them to develop these systems. So you have that pipeline that you're bringing new blood and new ideas, and some of them are then selected to become part of the staff of SARS. And SARS also use a lot of outside partners, private sector partners that assist, sorry for that, to assist them with this, to assist them to improve their systems and to improve the cybersecurity problems or hackings. So there's a lot more I can say, but I think I've already said enough. I give over to someone else to maybe add or request other information.
No, Professor Hasselman, I think you will never be able to say enough. I think we are all very privileged to have your insights. I think just from somebody who is currently working within government, Dr. Mapangwa, can I ask you to give us some insights as to how you feel government is currently addressing some of these issues that Professor Hasselman has mentioned, such as departments working in silos, possibly corruption, legacy systems. How are those issues currently being addressed?
Thank you very much, Hank. Well, yeah, indeed, some of the issues that have been highlighted are exactly what is happening. So we have noticed that one of the major things is for those systems that are working, you find that the systems do not talk to each other. There's the problem of interoperability. This is because, like she mentioned, because for an example, let's take Gauteng for an example. We've got two mega metropolitans within Gauteng, City of Tshwane, City of Joburg, as well as the City of Ekurhuleni. You will find that if you're a resident of Ekurhuleni, for an example, if you want to communicate to the city using a digital tool, you'll have to download an app that is specifically for Ekurhuleni. If maybe you work in Johannesburg, then you will need again to develop another app to do that. Similar when you go to Pretoria. So those are some of the challenges that are currently in place. So there is a need to harmonize all the systems to ensure that they work together. In my study, I did find that more advanced economies, in leading economies, they tend to invest in they come up with national strategy, which then sort of directs how the nation, a particular nation, for example, is going to go about its digital transformation footprint. So that solves most of the problem from the word go, because, for example, India have got a program called 100 Smart Cities program, wherein their plan is to develop 100 cities within India so that they can be digitally transformed. So from everyone works from the different 100 cities, they work from the same plan. They know which systems to go for. They know, they've got particular timelines that are put into place. So I think that is one idea that can help the current South African issues. So yes, we do have issues with legacy system. That is indeed true, and we also have an issue with IT skills. Some of the comments mentioned are indeed true. You would find that indeed in executive management, if you were to go to any website of this municipality that I've mentioned, of government departments, you'll find that there are instances where in Exco, they don't have an ICT executive. They rather have an ICT manager who would probably report to someone in corporate services. So, and then if you were to check, to compare it with companies listed in the JSE, you'll find that an ICT resource is one of the critical, just beneath the CEO, the CFO, then you've got a CTO who then manages the entire system, because you need an ICT enabled person to be able to ensure that such big organizations run. So that's another issue that we as government departments are failing with. But there are plans in place to address that. The president has appointed a fourth industrial revolution committee, which then oversees fourth industrial development, AI, IoT developments within the country. So for now, it's more on a more planning phase. We're yet to see more projects or more flagship projects that are then going to be used to show the benefits of this thing. So there are many challenges that are happening. Indeed, I can also agree with the issue of cybersecurity. There's a need to enhance some of our system. If you are based in Gauteng, you will realize that every year, if you've got a child who goes maybe in grade 1 and grade 8, you will need to apply to a centralized system within the Department of Education. We have had many queries and complaints regarding that system, because the system is just that sometimes it doesn't have, if like 1 million people are logging at the same time, the system usually does have instances of crashing. So those are some of the issues that government has already, is aware of, and I think they're working on a system to address it. So from my side, those are some of the examples and some of the issues that I can just put out there, that indeed the government has realized that there is a need to invest in this sector so that we can compete. We've seen what other countries are doing, even within the African continent, countries like Nigeria, countries like Kenya, they're also developing in ICT, then it makes them more competitive. So I think, going forward, that's why we've got departments like science and technology. We've got a number of departmental agencies that are there to support innovation in that area. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mapangwa. Thumiso, I'd like to bring you in here with regards to the paper you have done. Dr. Mapangwa has mentioned that we are currently in many instances, we are in a planning phase, and obviously most South Africans in a way get tired of hearing that, it's being planned, and nothing ever seems to happen as quickly as most of us would like. What do you see? How do you see we overcoming those challenges? How do we obviously need to take a world view. I think the paper does look at how digital transformation and the fourth industrial revolution is being addressed internationally. Dr. Mapangwa just mentioned Nigeria, India, these sort of developing countries. We always seem to be behind the 8 ball. How do you see us overcoming these challenges?
Thank you. Sorry for the late delay. In my best opinion, or personal experience, all these elements that make up or are components of digital transformation, I believe that we need to view them in an ecosystem way, if I could say that. So the people, the technology, the strategies, the organizations, individually, yes, they are important. And I believe that working as one or as an ecosystem it will really push up our speed in implementing digital transformation in the government. And it will also give a holistic view of where we need to be, where we are now, where we need to move, and ideally the picture that we are trying to get to. So I believe all these components will be the best way for us to get to the best way. I mean, the components together will be the best way for us to at least move forward or faster in terms of delivering or showing the public that indeed these initiatives are there and the government is putting them in place and in the best interest of the public. Thank you.
Will, please go ahead.
I'm not sure. Am I given the go ahead, Hank?
Yes, please go ahead.
Thank you so much, Hank. I just want to add to what Thumiso is saying. I think that, and I like to make the COVID-19 pandemic as a typical example. If you look at what this virus had done, is that you were either supposed to adapt or you were supposed to perish. And if you look at small organizations, they perished. The majority of them perished because they could not handle the pressure. So digital transformation is really the future. It is the reality. And I feel like the perception around it has decimally changed from what it was before the COVID-19 pandemic. During that time, because face-to-face contact was posing a risk of infection, technology was the only way to ensure continuity and to ensure that people are keeping in touch for social reasons and to communicate. It was the only way to ensure continuity. So I feel like the way forward is now to see it as a priority. It now has to be priority. It's not something that can be put at the back end, and something that can be planned for later. And what I really like after Mr. Mapangwa spoke is that they acknowledge all these issues that were put on the table by Professor Mali. And he also even tied to other issues that we don't even have insight of since while he's working in the government sectors. But what I really liked is that they're saying they are putting plans in place. Now, the danger is that for so many years, we've been hearing about plans to do this, plans to do that, but it's hardly instances where we would see results. But I feel like now, after the COVID-19 pandemic, as it had really opened up our eyes to not just the government, not just other organizations, but the South African citizens at large, seeing how this digital transformation or the COVID-19 pandemic came in and disrupted our lives. And now we had to adapt to technology very quickly. Otherwise, we would just be lost in the mist. I feel like now it will be more of a priority. The priority then would mean that we need to then put in more money, more budget for it. We should not be having any excuses to say there is no finances, there is no budget. I think then we need to be more acceptable. The government has to be more acceptable to interoperability, as really working in silos is really causing a lot of problems. And that's why we're having so much, this person is doing this and this person is doing that within the same traffic department, for example, but the one person cannot do everything all at once, because now the systems are not even communicating. There's one system to capture pictures, there's another system for paying, there's another system for this and that. So I believe that putting in a lot of budget, making the strategy as well as the vision of digital transformation very clear to the beneficiaries, to the government, to everyone, everyone that is infected and affected by this digital transformation is the way forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keneilwe. Professor Hasselman, I would like to bring you in again here. Keneilwe has now referred to the strategy over a long period of time, and Dumiso, I do see your hand. I'll answer you in a moment. How do you see this strategy? Is it being communicated, and are various stakeholders, have they been engaged in developing this strategy? And what is the short to long term plan with the strategy? How is it being implemented, and are there any sort of benchmarks in implementing the strategy? Or, like I said earlier, we all hear about all these wonderful plans, but unfortunately it seems that things aren't always happening as quickly as we would like to. Can you maybe comment on how the strategy is being implemented?
Yeah, sure. So since the national e-government strategy and national e-government strategy and roadmap document was gazetted in 2017, not much has happened. But the last few years, I think what Keneilwe also said about COVID-19, it forced government to relook at the services they provide and how these policies can be put in place. I just also want to mention, before I talk about the policies and the strategies, that last year the United Nations every year has an e-government survey report that they publish, and in 2022 South Africa was the leading digital transformation country in Africa. So I think that's commendable. So if you think how many challenges we sit with, can you imagine how many challenges the other African countries have to deal with? So then also another thing I didn't mention was in November 2022, government published the governance of ICT policy framework to address performance shortcomings. And this is also linked to the various policy frameworks, the King IV Code and the COBIT 2019 that's dealing with governance. And this framework is supported by implementation guidelines and templates that are issued or have been issued by the Department of Public Service and Administration, by DPSA. So that is, for me, a step in the right direction. As I mentioned earlier, they did provide this e-government strategy in 2017, but there were no way of telling government departments or entities, government entities, how to implement. So everybody went forward and they did what they thought was the right thing to do and not necessarily the good thing to do or the best for the benefit of the citizens. So yeah, that is for me a step in the right direction. That is, I think, also based on the output of the evaluation of how this e-government strategy was implemented in government. That was done in 2020, 2021. We were involved in that. Obviously, very sensitive information was shared there, which I cannot always mention, but the bottom line is that there's a problem. There was a problem with the culture in government as well, with people who do not want to upskill themselves, and leadership who, like I said, didn't have the adequate, educational background to be leaders, number one, and to understand how IT systems can be an enabler to improve government systems. Apart from that, also, they are currently working on a Digital Government Act, which is being developed, and the process of a green paper has started. And there's also an integrated financial management system that will soon be replace legacy systems to modernize technology. So this is what Keneilwe also said about the funding. All these new initiatives, I think, is moving government forward and allows us to be positive going forward. I don't know if I've answered your question, or but I can also say that the thing of culture, change management, is really a huge important thing to focus on, from leadership down to your public servant, and to get rid of corruption in government, because there is a lot of corruption, and not necessarily at the high level, also at the lowest level, where they see sort of, if there's a tender or there's a system where you have to put in a document, and then the public servant will crash the system because he or she doesn't want to work that day. That is, for instance, an example. Or if people have to provide documents, then this person will ask 1,000 rand to streamline the process, and he or she puts that money in their pocket. So there's a lot of corruption also that needs to be addressed, and there are government departments that have made examples that people were not even aware that they were investigated and until they were exposed. So there are good things happening, like I said, and I'm sure we can be more positive about the future and how IT can be used as a support mechanism. It cannot be replaced. We cannot replace people. So you need to have competent people who are dedicated and committed to make this country a success at all levels in government.
Thank you, Professor Hasselman. We certainly love to hear that there are some positives coming forth from all of these meetings. Chimiso, you've had your hand up.
Thank you, Henk. For me, it's more of a comment and basically agreeing to what Prof. Malene and Kina have said already. The culture part, as Prof. Malene mentioned, that is also one of the key things that we need to look at overall. I mean, we need to now have a new mindset. We need to have a digital mindset. And once that is in place, and a common vision and understanding of how our e-government programs should entail, especially in removing these silos between government departments, then we would be able to move quicker and realize all these e-government program initiatives. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chimiso. Mukundi. Dr. Mapangwa, I beg your pardon.
Thank you very much. Yes, I just wanted to sort of also mention that although, yes, there are some of the challenges that have been outlined, and there's some planning that is happening, but there have been some wins that the government has developed. Yes, during COVID, it sort of accelerated the process, but you would notice wherever you are, government is making sort of the market environment conducive to allow even private sectors to come into the process of increasing digitalization. You would have realized that many government entities or departments or municipalities in particular, they're also increasing access to broadband, access to Wi-Fi to people who previously would not have access to such things. So, so when they go to their nearest clinic or service station or service center, they're able to access some of the services within those centers of government. So we do have, centers where if you go to your local municipality, they will provide you access to tools that will enable you, to participate in the digital, dispensation. So we have had programs that have been successful within the national department. They've developed the integrated financial management system. We've got projects at SASSA wherein it uses biometric technology to manage social grants. We've got programs at Department of Health. If you were to go to clinics within the city of Joburg and Ekurhuleni, you get what we call an e-health file. So there's no need. Maybe if you go to a different clinic, you need to come up with papers and documentation. So your information is on the system. If you are based in a different ward, you are able to access, when you've got health issues while you are somewhere else, you are able, the doctor or the clinic officials, they're able to access your information and able to provide you with the necessary information. I've also mentioned the issue wherein people previously would have to go and queue to get school kids placement. So there are other projects that are happening in the meantime, but definitely there's still a long way to go, and there are international learnings and the global trends, something that has worked somewhere else that we can be able to use as well in South Africa. Also, what I've also realized in my study is that some countries depend, or they enter into multi-year contracts with multinational organization, technology companies, wherein they build the infrastructure for them. So there are benefits and also drawbacks of going that route. But we are not there yet as a country, because we do still want to maintain our independence. So that is where things are currently. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mapangwa. Kaniulwe, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you so much, Henk. It's very interesting what Dr. Mapanga is saying, and I think it's worth commending the work that has been done already in the government sectors. And what I really like is that every time he speaks, he is acknowledging some of the mistakes or some of the challenges that they're being faced with, and they are planning to go forward. Professor Malene mentioned something very interesting, and Dumi had to top it up when they spoke about culture. But I feel like there's one thing again that we should not even look, we should not overlook, which is the issue of change. Change is a very important part of digital transformation. And if you look at, again, the bank, I like to use the bank because for me, I feel like it's there as compared to government sectors in terms of technology. If you look at what has happened prior to the pandemic and post to the COVID pandemic, people were being retrenched at that time. Now, if you look at the government sector, it's hardly a case whereby people would be retrenched. Even if the government is not doing well, they never really get rid of their employees. I feel like it's something that we also have to really look into, in a sense that the private sector will prioritize, opportunities that are presented. And if they see that certain departments are no longer bringing in income, they're very quick to close or shut down those specific departments because they're not bringing any value to their income or to their business at large. But if you look at the government sector, they have a history of, keeping their employees up until retirement stages, which is why so many people would really love to work for government. But the issue of culture then comes into the fact that digital transformation poses a risk to people's jobs majority of the time. And the reason I'm saying this, if you go again to the the private sector and you look at a bank, for example, in the past we used to have long queues where there was different tellers and you would go and queue there. Now we have ATMs, there's hardly tellers. So what happened to those employees? Chances are they've been placed somewhere else, so they really did lose their jobs. So I think also the reason people are so reserved in a sense of embracing digital transformations, the fear of being relevant, the fear of, will I even have my job tomorrow, or is it going to be replaced by a system? Thank you.
Dumiso, I see you've had your hand up. Dumiso, you are on mute.
Apologies, I thought I pressed it, but I missed it. Apologies for that. Yes, thanks, Hank. I mean, I didn't want to detract from the conversation from my Leonard colleagues. I think I'm enjoying the engagement and the feedback. I think what I wanted to address, and I think it's been raised a couple of times, is a question that's raised by somebody who's anonymous in the Q&A around, not reusing data. And I think it's or information within government departments. And I just thought it was something I'd like to address, right? Because it's something we talk about all the time. And I think our Leonard colleagues here keep mentioning the word interoperability, right? And it's something we talk about from a Microsoft point of view as well a lot, because it's amazing how many times you go to different government departments who are having similar challenges and keep building siloed systems, right? Which to solve the same problem, which sometimes it defies logic, because you realize there's a great opportunity to leverage on each other's systems, creating open platforms or shared services, right? Where, and I'll give you a typical example. So I work a lot with CETA as well. I'm an advisor for CETA. And one of the challenges we've been given by the Minister of Communications before she left was she wants government to be paperless by 2024, right? So we're going through a list of all these, we're starting with like paper processes that to automate, simple one being Z83, right? And it was amazing when we found out that there's so many government departments who are already automating Z83 on their own, which kind of didn't make sense, because you could automate it at the center at, like, for instance, the Department of, which one is it? Which department? Now I'm forgetting which department looks after, is it DPSA, I think, Service Administration, that looks after the Z83, where you can automate it in a central location and make sure everybody else has access to it. And I think for me, that's an important thing, right? Because digital transformation works hand in hand with data and analytics, right? Because once you implement technology systems and digital systems, you have access to a lot of data and information, and you can use that data to make decisions, right? Better decisions. And when you think about it, government has actually some of the biggest data on citizens, right? When you think about the data that Home Affairs has on you, when you think about the data that Department of Health has on individuals, we're talking about e-natives. When you think about it, these departments have a lot of information. SARS, for instance, we talked about the South African Revenue Service, and all the data they have on you. And you realize the potential that exists when they if they were to combine their data and put it on a single platform and make decisions on that data. And the good thing is we've attempted this, for instance, with the eThekwini municipality, where they've built these municipal dashboards and strategic hubs, which are available to everybody online, where they're saying, we want to get information about, our local councils, our municipalities, our cities, want to know what's happening with our, revenue, with the rubble collection, want to know, what's happening with services that are offered. And you realize the amount of depth of information that exists, and that allows them to make very key decisions in terms of, how to allocate budget to a specific municipality, or, how to even put potholes. I talked about in the last webinar, where not potholes, building speed humps, based on data that you get about where accidents happen. And I think that's the journey we'd like to see government taking, right? We understand it's a digital transformation journey. You're going from being digital or doing digital to being digital, right? Where instead of being just transactional and automating, processes and taking them from, manual physical documents to digital, you want to start embedding these things in your business models and how you operate, which is also key to the skills development part, which I think has been mentioned by Marlene and a couple of other colleagues here. So I just wanted to address it to say, I think, I'm also very happy to see the progress that government is making. But I think now we're almost ready to take it to the next level, right? And I think our citizens expect that, because if you think about it, the way us as individuals interact with technology every day, from when we wake up, right? When you order food, when you order groceries, when you watch TV, you know, technology has become a natural part of our lives. And I think we expect the same level of experience when we interact with banks, as you know, you're mentioning, as when we interact with our government, right? So I think government now needs to kind of take it a step further now to say, you know, we've done the basics, let's now take it to the next level. Let's work together, let's collaborate amongst each other's government departments, and let's start making, you know, key decisions that are going to improve efficiencies within operations, but also start improving service levels to our citizens. So I just want to add that in. Thanks.
Thank you so much for that. Just to look at one of the questions that our audience is asking, can we safely say, I think Professor Hasselman, I think I'd like to bring you in here. Can we safely say that South Africa's IT infrastructure with regards to our 5G technology, the way we've been rolling out our fiber networks, are we ready for such a digital transformation and the fourth industrial revolution advancements?
Yeah, thank you, Henk. Yes, I think we are in the urban cities, but there's also something that is really important, is that government should also work from a bottom-up approach and not just a top-down. But you cannot do the bottom if the top is not healthy and safe and you know, modernized. So the 4IR strategy and policy framework document also talks about this, about the infrastructure. And we also know that the infrastructure is a huge problem in the rural areas, because they sometimes have to climb into a tree to get service if they're lucky. So we have to address every level of government when it comes to 4IR and the new type of digital transformation technologies to be operational and effective enough. You can also see that, you know, we just talked about ordering food and groceries, but in the rural areas, you don't have that service. You have a different service for the spaza shops, etc. So yes, we'll have to look at the infrastructure in the rural areas and at all government levels. The problem is, the challenge, I think, linked to the problem is that you have different political parties involved in different levels of government, and that also creates other challenges and other problems. So they are fighting amongst one another for leadership and to make a change. And while they're fighting, you know, nothing gets really happening positively to the benefit of the citizen. So the infrastructure in the rural areas is a huge concern, and it was mentioned by many government departments. And there's expectation that this should be addressed immediately. And I know that the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development are addressing many of these issues, because they're investing a lot of infrastructure in rural schools and in ICT hubs that focus on agriculture, and allowing citizens then to use these hubs to get access to information that they previously had to take a taxi, you know, to get the forms to complete. They can now download it from these hubs. So there are some diamonds in the dust, but overall the infrastructure in the rural areas and the district levels of municipalities also needs to be addressed if we want to make 4IR accessible to everybody in the country.
Yes, Kunilwe.
Thank you so much, Henk. Marlene raises a very important point, specifically about the rural areas. And if you look at what the initiatives that are being implemented so far, even when the government is trying, you know, whatever small infrastructure they would try to implement at government, at rural areas, in schools, in health, regardless of what sector, the efforts that they try to put in to try and bring them, you know, to the digital transformed or the urban area world, to just try and teach them and change pedagogical skills and equip them. majority of the time they go in vain. And this is because of, digital transformation then opens the problem about then poverty, about not having job opportunities, and now we're having an issue of theft where people are just stealing all these initiatives, and then we just going back and forth. We are implementing, the government is implementing, and the citizens are just taking. So I feel like also involving the community when you want to try and better them and improve them. It's important to involve the community, have community engagement, let them know about this initiative and what benefits it's going to give them, and hopefully that will reduce the issue of theft. I wanted to, when Dumiso was talking, because he made an example about Home Affairs, and I remembered that, when I went to the Home Affairs and I was going to sign for my marriage, it was funny enough that when I got there, this is a Home Affairs that issues ID cards. They are responsible for everybody's identity in South Africa. But when I got there, they wanted an ID. And I'm like, why do you want an ID? They said, come with your ID, they're going to make a copy. And I felt that we can present our IDs everywhere else if possible. But why the bank? Why the Home Affairs? Because they issue IDs. But we did bring in our IDs. But in my mind, I'm thinking, if the Home Affairs was digitally transformed, just putting my finger on a device, it should have put in my identity. So yeah, I just had to share that specific story. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keneilwe, for your insights there. I think my next question, before I get to some more audience questions, Dumiso, we've sort of touched on, I think Professor Hasselman touched on the fact that we, for example, SARS have a pipeline of young students or young graduates rather coming through. How are we addressing skills development in the way we are digitally transforming? How are we addressing the shortages that we're experiencing there? And what can government as well as the private sector do to improve matters in this regard?
Thank you again, Hank. The government is addressing this skills development issue, but personally, I feel maybe it is gone about the wrong way. I would personally say it needs to start from the bottom, because right now digital skills are mostly presented in higher education, and sometimes when fresh graduates come out from schools and enter employment at entry level, that's when they're also equipped. So I believe that it needs to start from, if possible, elementary. It needs to start from the down basic until we get to the level where these graduates or individuals are at a working level to implement the skills. So I highly suggest that government and higher education start looking at this in a different way, if not already done so. But I think that would be the best way to go about giving these individuals the skills and equipping them so that they can better improve the South African economy and themselves at large. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Mapangwa?
Thank you very much. No, I just wanted to also weigh in on this question to say that indeed there are a number of programs that government, although I don't speak for government, I just know because I'm aware of these programs, and then from time to time, they go through. I do go through them in my work. So there are a number of programs that the country is doing to address ICT and for skills development. The Department of Communication and Digital Technologies, for one, they've got a national digital skill strategy, which aims to address the gap in the ICT. So they've got a number of internships learnerships that every year, if you were to check any recruitment website or any government website, you will see that the government absorbs a number of students throughout the country for specific programs within different departments and entities and provincial government. There are also programs from the Department of Higher Education and Training. I think they call it the Centers of Specialization Program, which focuses on specific training and vocational areas that are aimed at addressing the skills challenges. There's also partnership with maybe Mr. Koza, Dr. Koza will know, with other multinational like Microsoft and Cisco, Google, that enables anyone really. If you go to any Ekurhuleni library, when you get into the library, you will see there are always placards on the library, on the communication center of the library, wherein if people want to learn skills and ICT skills for free, they are able to enroll for such programs. And then at the end of the program, like through Google, you can get a certificate of some sort. So there are a number of initiatives that are there, and some of them are indeed being communicated by the respective government departments and entities. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mpangwa. Professor Urselman.
Yes, thank you. I just want to add to that, that government is also currently looking into improving the salaries of IT staff in government, and so that they are more on par with the private sector, because what private sector does, as soon as there's a very competent and agile person working in government, they are snapped up because they are offered a better salary. So that is also a concern for government, and they are going to address this by relooking the salary scales of IT professionals in government. And so they want to also have ICT specific or specialized positions, so that these positions can then support all the government departments. They have also talked about developing homegrown systems to look at developing innovation within government, and using the students also for that, and also link with places like the Innovation Hub. So they are considering all these possibilities of recruiting and developing and retaining an agile and multidisciplined, highly skilled staff or workforce that will make a difference when it comes to decision making. And there's also a drive to upskill government officials internally from the bottom up to the top down, based on this skill strategy that the DCDT has published also last year. So yes, that is the things that I'm aware of that are happening.
Thank you, Professor Urselman. That's certainly very positive news. I think we all are aware of the challenges with regards to salary scales. Dr. Koza, I see you have your hand up.
Yes, thank you. And actually, it's not Dr. Koza, it's still Mr. Yet. I heard you earlier. I didn't want to correct you. I think you just conferred a doctorate on me.
Sorry about that.
No problem. I just want to once again support, I think, what Marlene is doing. Personally, the skills development initiative is something that's key for what we're doing, and we think it's key for government's digital transformation, right? Because I know that one of the two key things that digital transformation is not just about technology. I think maybe I'm preaching to the converted here, but just to let our audience know, it goes beyond technology, right? It goes into having a digital culture, having things like a digital strategy and a way of working. And yes, key to having a working digital transformation is having a proper digital strategy, but also having those key skills and knowledge. And one of the challenges we faced, and I think Marlene mentioned this or touched on it, is it's even at the top level how the decision makers and the key stakeholders don't even understand what digital technology means and the impact that it has on government, right? So from an education part, from a Microsoft point of view, that's how we handle it. We handle it both from a top down and a bottom up. From a top down to say, and I think I'm not sure if Dumiso or who mentioned these things. There's a lot of initiatives, policy decisions being made. For instance, one of the things that's been driven recently is called the Cloud Directive, right? Where the DPSA and CETA have issued a directive to say government departments are allowed to go on cloud, to adopt cloud technology, right? But we realize just having a policy directive or having these legislative decisions or regulatory decisions doesn't have the impact. So sometimes you have to actually physically teach people and give them the knowledge and the education. So there's a drive that we run with some of the senior stakeholders in government in terms of impact of these emerging technologies like AI, ChatGPT recently is the buzzword. But I think more importantly, honestly, it's at the bottom up level, right? As a country, South Africa has a skills shortage, right? There's not enough people who are working, there's not enough jobs, so it's very key and important, I think, for everybody, not just for government, to make sure that we have the necessary skills. I know why SARS wins when it comes to this, because SARS is one of the few effective revenue generating government departments, right? So it's kind of easier for them because they have these big budget digital transformation programs because they have a direct impact on their operations and how much revenue they're able to generate or collect from citizens. So they see a direct correlation, whereas if it's just a service that you offer or deliver, it's harder to see that. But I think for them, they've definitely seen the impact of skilling these individuals, right? We actually driving this from a CETA perspective as well to say, to empower government departments, to empower municipalities, to empower cities, they also need to have some of these development or these key skills, right? To develop some of these key skills. One of them we've identified is cybersecurity, right? And I think Marlene mentioned this as well, is we've had a lot of, cyber attacks that happen to some of our government departments, some known, some unknown. And obviously that's always the risk, that the more you go digital, the more you adopt technology, you are susceptible to some of these attacks, right? So it's important that government, and in South Africa in general, by the way, there's a lack of cybersecurity resources. So there's an initiative we're driving now to start building these cybersecurity centers or, centers of excellence, which is definitely key. But I think overall is having these digital centers of excellence and developing some of these digital skills, I think will definitely always be important to the success of government's digital transformation. I see Dumiso's got a hand up, so I'm not sure if you want to acknowledge him.
Yeah, sure. Dumiso, go ahead.
Yeah, it's more of acknowledging what you're saying, Dumiso. I totally agree with what you're saying. And for me, it's these skills initiatives and development should not be just a once-off thing. It needs to be continuous, especially in the digital world, because tomorrow something new has come through. We learn something else. So these initiatives need to be supported by all stakeholders, and the individuals or users, they also need this support from the stakeholders. So it needs to be like a continuous development type of program. Thank you.
Thank you, Dumiso. Just to address another of our questions, or rather comments in our Q&A section, I see that Dion Maharaj, thank you, Dion, for all of your insightful questions today. He has actually, Dumiso, this request is probably more for you, is to develop an emergency app that will be able to assist in recording and dispatching emergency calls. Any comments on that?
It definitely is something feasible, something doable. The challenge with these kind of apps, again, it's where you approach it from, right? So are you going to do it for, I'm talking about location. I think that's the thing. And then who initiates, a service like that? Because and I'm trying to think, there's a couple of discussions where we've had from a Microsoft point of view, where cities are saying, help us, from a public safety and health point of view, we wanted this integrated system where whether you need a police on-site dispatch or whether you need fire and ambulance, because that's the thing, because sometimes you don't want to just make it too silo. I think that's a challenge. I think there has been efforts before where, apps have been built just for, either police only, or just for, fire people only, or maybe just for ambulances. But I think for me, again, here this is where we want to have an integrated approach, right? So where you take it all the way from a local level, in your local area, all the way to the city, integrated to all the way to even national government, where even the SAPS can be part of that. So I definitely think it's a great idea. It's definitely something that should be done. But if I were to approach it, I'd want to spend more time instead of just building an app to make sure that we build something that's going to be, consistent across wherever you live, right? Whether you have network in your area, for instance, or not. These are the kind of things we should definitely consider. But it's doable. I mean, we have examples at Microsoft where we've built things like this in other countries, like Singapore's, in Dubai, there's other countries who've done that. It's doable, just it requires an integrated approach. I think that's a comment I want to make.
Thank you so much, Ndumiso. Dr. Mapangwa?
Oh, thank you very much. I just wanted to also talk on this issue that indeed currently, especially in Gauteng, the metros have already developed this particular apps. For example, even in Ekurhuleni, they've got my City of Ekurhuleni app, my CO app. If you just go to Play Store, you download it, you are able through the app. You're able to lodge a municipal complaint. You are able to request an ambulance services. You are able to do for emergency, for traffic, for location, to report a service delivery issue. So these apps have been live for more than 2 years, 2 to 3 years. So it's been happening in the city of Ekurhuleni. So it's also been happening in the city of Tshwane. Yes, there is a need maybe for other remote municipalities, those ones that even their citizens maybe will not be accessible to such technology. But if you are within the Gauteng city region, you would be able to have access to have Wi-Fi even in your locality, to have much better network connectivity. So there is an effort from the public sector in general to do that. Just that obviously it will start where the centers of economy are based. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mapangwa. I would like to look at another one of our audience questions. Ntando, I do see your question. I will leave that one for a bit later. I see that one of our anonymous attendees has asked, digital literacy and the lack thereof in terms of technology infrastructure is a very serious concern in South Africa, in our schools specifically. How can the educators integrate technology and the curriculum as part of the digital transformation while they are not well trained on the use of IT tools? So specifically addressing perhaps the lack of teaching power or teaching resources in terms of a knowledge base for digital transformation. How do you see this aspect being addressed in schools? Can I ask Thumiso?
Thank you again. There are programs, initiatives that have been done to assist the teachers and learners with digital skills. I would actually like to ask either Prof. Marlene or Kinelo on this one, because they have worked on a lot of projects where they were upskilling the teachers with digital or ICT skills for one, so that they can be able to translate them to the learners, especially in rural schools. So Prof. Marlene or Kinelo.
Yes, thank you, Tumi. So an example of, it's for us, it's always important to empower the teachers first and not the learners, because they know how to use technology. So many of the teachers don't have the, courage to use technology because they feel, they have inadequate skills. So focusing on them and using gamification to make it an enjoyable experience, because teachers are workshop fatigued. They don't want to sit in a workshop anymore. Is one area where we have brought in a focus on using a teaching strategy, and then couple that with making it enjoyable and making it fun. They have to bake cupcakes on a tablet, and that is something that's very new to them, and that also improved their digital literacy skills in such an extent that they were then confident to go and do on a mobile banking on their phones without having to travel far to get access to doing transfers on their bank accounts. So that is a ripple effect that something small like this can have in improving digital literacy skills of citizens and people in government. Is if you can make the training fun and make it involve people and not just lecture to them, that can make a big difference. I don't know if I've answered the question.
Yes, thank you, Professor Hasselman. I appreciate the answer. Then finally, before we end off, ladies and gentlemen, I think it's important to note that a sort of a general theme that has come through from the questions on our Q&A section has been that there seems to be a lack of integration between departments, a lack of communication, very much a culture of silo working within our various departments. And I know we have addressed this to a degree earlier, but I would also like to ask our panel, how are we looking at the international examples? How can we learn from other countries where digital transformation has been successfully implemented or is being successfully implemented to a degree? I know that there's very much a discrepancy between countries and a varying degree of development in terms of digital transformation, but how can we learn from our international partners and from can I say, for lack of a better word, better examples out there in terms of how we can go about things and what is needed to make that happen? Dumiso?
Hi, sorry, my mouse seems to be stuck a bit there. So I'll attempt to answer this one, even though it is a difficult one to answer. But this is, I guess, part of my job, right? So as an industry advisor, half the time when we engage with government departments, when they're trying to solve a particular problem, what we normally do is, I gave an example of, trying to go paperless by 2024, right? And then we, for instance, at Microsoft have a use case where we've helped the Dubai government department be completely paperless. I think they've been paperless since 2021. So, in Dubai, for instance, you will not find a single piece of paper when you do any government transactions, going from getting an ID, passport. But when you ask the question in terms of what's required, I think there's a couple of things, right? And I think we've talked about them in different ways, because there's different, I think what's important to realize, the first thing I want to say is there's different levels of maturity, for countries, for governments and public sector. So when you approach this thing, it differs, depending on the challenges that each country or each government deals with. Having said that, though, there's certain things, that building blocks that you need to have in place in order to have a successful digital strategy in government, right? One of them, I mentioned them, is having a clear digital strategy, and having stakeholders who buy in and believe in this digital strategy, right? Because without a strategy in terms of what we're trying to achieve, we won't succeed. Having things like the political will, right, to get it done, to get things done, to make decisions, policies implemented, it is key. Having the right skills and individuals in the right positions, for instance, is another thing that came up that you have. So there's all these basic building blocks, right? In terms of having the right skills, and all these things. One thing that I think we've seen key, by the way, in having digital transformation succeed in government, is the digital identities part. And I think Dumiso kind of mentioned it as well, or is it? I'm not sure who mentioned it. Is having a digital identity, we've realized, is always key to automating government processes. Because it doesn't make sense when you're trying to digitize everything, and yet when you identify a person, either because they're going into a hospital, or they've called an ambulance, or you're trying to they're trying to register them for SASSA, or you're trying to find ghost employees in government departments. Having that digital identity and securing the digital identity by, for instance, I mean, this is something that I've been driving. We haven't been very successful at yet. Is embedding this digital identity in a blockchain, for instance, where it's a distributed ledger. Nobody can forge it. Nobody can have fake, South African passports and IDs. And I think for me, that's one thing I'd like to see. To mention, to say I've seen as successful to having a successful digital transformation government is having that identity where through that digital identity you're able to interact between government and citizens. I definitely think is key. But there's other elements, I'm sure, which maybe other colleagues might mention, because I was just looking mainly from a Microsoft, point of view and what we've done in other countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Ndemiso. And to our audience, we are running out of time at a brisk rate. I would like to ask our panel members for any closing comments before we wrap up for today. Ndemiso, let's start with you.
Thank you, Hank. This was a very interesting and exciting webinar. I really enjoyed, and I definitely agree with what the other colleagues were saying, and the questions that were asked are so relevant. So for me, my take is all these, as Ndemiso said, building blocks or elements. Once we have seen them or visualized them as a whole, one ecosystem, all of them in one, like I said, ecosystem, then we will be on our way with the digital transformation initiatives in South Africa. That is what I feel or take from this session. Thank you.
Dr. Mapangwa, any final words?
Thank you very much for the opportunity. Basically, what I can say is that from today's conversations, most of the items that we discussed have been touched or are being currently discussed in many forums that the current government on a weekly and a monthly basis continues to hold with different stakeholders. Yes, indeed, we have seen that there are certain sort of key success factors that some of the countries that have been quite successful in digital literacy have sort of adopted. There's a need for government support and all of government support into one digital strategy to provide digital infrastructure, to work on issues of data, privacy and cybersecurity, to develop the talent. So those are some of the issues that different government departments are currently working on, and then hopefully, as we go on forward, we'll start to see the benefits of such investment by government. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us, Dr. Mapangwa. Professor Ursula?
Yes, thank you. I think there's a lot to learn from other countries, and we've seen very good examples from countries like Estonia, Finland, Korea, Japan, Singapore. And then in Africa as well, Kenya and Ghana and Rwanda has been, going forward with the digital transformation. I think what is needed in South Africa is not an e-government strategy, but a digital transformation strategy with a vision of how this can be implemented successfully within a few years' time. Otherwise we're not going to make it. And then coupled with that, I think there should also be monitoring and evaluation of success and progress to show impact, because many of government's initiatives are not monitored and evaluated sufficiently to show progress. And that's a way that government can show what are they doing and how are they implementing their transformation and where they want to be, and not just a national 2013 national plan, but also have a digital transformation, envisioning the future for themselves. So that's my take on this. Thank you for the opportunity, and I hope it was insightful to many people. And there's a lot of documents one can refer people to go and read, especially the United Nations e-government survey of 2022, which has a lot of examples of success and how they have evaluated governments to indicate where they are on the scale in the world? Why are some progressing more than others, and what have they put in place? So that is a good document to go and read if you do not have access to it yet. It's freely available on the internet. Thank you again, and it's nice to have conversations like this because we can see we all have the same idea. We want to make this country a success, and you know, empower our citizens also to feel that they can trust government again. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Asselman. And yes, we will try and put some of the links to some of those interesting papers on our LinkedIn group for those of you who would like to read them. Then finally, Damiso, any final words from your side?
Yes, I think for me, it's just want to thank Regenesis for this opportunity and having these kind of sessions, these webinars, right? I think just keeping the dialogue open between, you know, the private, public sector, as well as academia is always important to make sure that, you know, we keep these things top of mind. You know, I'm passionate about, you know, South Africa. I'm passionate about Africa. I'm passionate about our country. And nothing would make me happier than see it succeed, right? And it takes individuals like us, you know, to try and change the narrative, because everything else is negative. You know, things are going bad. We see them every day, you know, and it's hard to keep staying positive. So I think I'm glad that we have these kind of sessions where we get to share, you know, these learnings and experiences with like-minded individuals, and hopefully inspire others, right, to help improve our public sector going forward. So I just want to thank you for the opportunity and looking forward to further sessions in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Damiso. We will definitely like to invite all of you back for our future sessions. I was privileged to be able to lead such an esteemed panel of industry experts today, and I think they have provided us with great insight and a lot of additional knowledge that most of us common people on the street did not necessarily know about. And I think this really gives us hope for what's to come in the future. I think, yes, there's a lot of negativity going around in the public sector at the moment, in our public, about the public sector, let's put it that way. But I think to know that there are people such as those working on this panel, or that have been on this panel today, who are working towards a digital transformation and are working towards achieving that vision for 10, 15 years from now, in terms of how we as a country can develop and how our public sector will be servicing us in future. There's a lot of hope to take from that, and I think there's a lot of positivity, and it will give us all a greater sense of basically we can sleep sound tonight to know that these people are working towards achieving these goals and this vision in the next 10 to 20 years. For those of you who have joined us online and on LinkedIn, thank you so much. We really appreciate it as Regenesis. We would like to invite you back, and you are more than welcome to join our various social media groups such as Instagram and LinkedIn. Please just go and search for Regenesis, and you will find that there are a lot more discussions such as the one we've had today, and they will give us some greater insights into areas that we may not be experts in, but where we can round up some experts and make sure that we are well educated and well informed. So thank you for all of you who have joined us today, and I would like to wish you a very happy Tuesday further and a very happy week. Good day.